One of the main things that we really all just love witnessing is children who have the complete freedom to choose what they're doing in any moment, and that there's no end product, there's no underlying tick boxes, they just know that they're there for their own reasons. And in Australia, we're surprised at, we pride ourselves at being the outdoorsy nation that likes to do things, but realistically, when we see the number of children coming through our programs that have never felt mud before or climbed a tree, there's a lot of work to be done, a lot of work.
This is Stokely, where we try to be involved, to listen and learn, for us all to evolve. So welcome to you and welcome the world. We hope you enjoy the stories to be told.
Stokely is a creative endeavour to listen, learn and evolve through the art of conversation. And here's your host, Mael.
Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Stokely. Thanks a lot for joining me today as we welcome our guest, Vicci Oliver, one of the co-founders of the Wildlings Forest School, which is described as a school led by adventurous nature playmakers, risk takers and children's rights advocates. After teaching in traditional schools, Vicci's world was soon opened up to alternative models of learning, particularly the Forest School philosophy. To Vicci, this philosophy embodied many of her own lifestyle values and seemed to be the perfect blend of world schooling and wild schooling. Some of Nicki's passions and expertise lie in ecological literacy, environmental protection and stewardship, and ensuring diversity and alternatives in our education systems to better prepare our children for an uncertain future. A conversation that I really enjoyed and learned an awful lot about. I really hope this resonates with some people, and I really hope that some of the topics discussed can help you open up a conversation in your own life. And if you feel like this spoke to you in some way, I really do encourage that. Use this as a way to engage with someone that you know as a friend, or you don't really know but you want to open up a conversation with. So in saying that, I really hope you enjoy it. And as always, we want to take time to pay our respects and acknowledge the traditional custodians upon the lands where this podcast is listened to and created. And I want to pay my respects to the owners, past, present, and emerging. So thanks a lot for joining us. Let us know how you go with starting up that conversation with someone in your life or a stranger that you've just met. Thanks a lot for tuning in, and I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Hello, Vicci. How are you? I'm so stoked that you can join us today. Vicci, you and your partner, Nicki, operate this incredible program, Wildlings Forest School, and I'm just so stoked to be able to speak about this some more. So let's get into you as a person first. Can you tell us a little bit about what you currently do in this in the world, and by way of introduction, and then we can work back from that?
Yeah, sure. So I'm one of the co-founders of Wildlings Forest School. So me and my business partner, Nicki and Vicci, we met at one of the playgroups that I started when I first became a mum. So if I backtrack to where I started, it will help to get to where I am now. But when I became a mum, it was like this. I know a lot of people say they lose themselves when they become a mum, but for me, it was how I found myself. So I had to really make some decisions on how I was going to raise another human being. So I really wanted to connect with people who had like-minded ideas on how we were raising kids, and I couldn't really find that myself when I moved. I moved from Mackay when my eldest daughter was 2, and I just had my second baby, and I was really looking to connect with other mums. So I started a play group, and it evolved into being like a nature play group. So really connecting with people who are looking at being respectful with their children and, looking at using natural alternatives to, how we live our lives every day. And that's where I met Nicki. So she came to one of my play groups and we just connected straight away, and we were asking similar sorts of questions. So we're both teachers. So we're looking at are we going to go back into teaching? And we're feeling a little bit disconnected from education system. We're also questioning where our children were going to go to school. All of these things started to come up together, and we just we just had so many things that were so similarly aligned, and we started to think of a concept outside of teaching and what could we create together. And so we started along the lines of a homeschool co-op. So at this stage was sort of delaying our children from starting school and what can we create that we want for our own kids first. So everything that we've created has been centered around what we want for our own kids. So we started this homeschool co-op. Part of it was like inside, half of it was outside. And essentially what we found was that everything we were doing inside, we could do outside, and the kids they were so much more at ease being outside. And we learnt so much more about outdoor education and forest schooling as a philosophy. And we just started to create our business around that. And so we'd create a program and people would come and love it and then make suggestions. So why don't you do holiday programs? Why don't you do different play groups? Why don't you start here? Why don't you do this? And we just kept saying yes. And the more we learned and the more that we were able to embed our own philosophies, we molded our business directly around what we believe children need. And so it has been really cool now to have this business that is basically seeing children have freedom somewhere where they have complete freedom. So they have the only rules they need to abide by are safety rules, that they have to keep themselves safe. But we try and say yes as much as we can, and we allow them to be who they are. We allow them to make mistakes. We are there to be supporting them through whatever it is they're trying to achieve. And they can climb trees, they can build fires and cook on fires and use tools and build rafts to float on a creek and learn all about wildlife and learn all about who they are in our world within a community that is really supportive. And that's what we do now. So we offer whatever we can for children to experience that more freedom.
Okay. Now, why is that something that needs to be done? Like what is this? Why is this not getting done in our current system of schooling? Like where's that disconnect?
The disconnect comes from a lot of different places, but traditionally schooling's only really quite a modern phenomenon. So it's only been around for a couple of 100 years, modern day schooling. And it has come from a need to mass produce factory workers. And so we haven't really evolved on that line of thinking for a very long time. So education at the moment is very adult-centered. So adults decide what children learn. Adults decide when they learn it. They decide when they go to the toilet. They decide when they get to eat. Everything about children when they're in educational settings, for the most part, is controlled by an adult. And children don't actually get to experience that sense of control in their lives as much as they should. And that's a lot of the reasons why we have some behaviour problems or mental health issues, is because children they haven't learned how to be resilient. They haven't learned how to cope with things on their own. They haven't been given an opportunity to make their own decisions and to gain some independence, learn from their mistakes. And they're all learning how to just get the A or just pass. They're learning how to work within a system so that they can get what they need to do in order to just go through the motions. They're losing the love of learning. You've got so many children who hate reading, they don't like maths and all of this sort of stuff, when children innately love learning. And you see that in children before they actually get into formalised education. They are just thirsty for knowledge. And unfortunately, somewhere along the way, and it is hard, obviously, modern day education, we do have to manage so many children, like a lot of children in one setting. So we do have to cater for the average. It is really difficult to cater for everyone's different needs in the setting as it is now. So that's why what we do is so important, because they're like a lot of teachers and educational systems are bound by so many restrictions. It's going to take a lot of time to undo those. So that's where we come in, to be able to provide something for children.
Shake up the system.
Yeah, and shake up the system and to inspire people to just make changes. So we do train educators, a lot of early childhood, because early childhood's really switched on. A lot of them are doing bush kindies and outdoor learning. So they're actually at the forefront of changing things. So we do a lot of training for those educators, and we're starting to see it infiltrate into primary schools as well. which is something. And we'd love to see it more often, because a lot of the time it might be once a week for a couple of hours. But what we really like to see is it happening really regularly. Like every day, children need to be outside. They need to be given time away from structured adult-centered activities.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned before that both yourself and Nicki come from a traditional teaching background, and so I assume that you both went through like the formal education on that. And did like when you were going through that process of becoming a teacher, did that all resonate with you, and then things started to change a little bit later on, or were you going through those programs and courses and feeling a bit of a disconnect, a bit of a grind against what you really felt was right?
I think me personally, can't speak for Nicki, but I was a people pleaser. So I was an A grade student, people pleaser, know how to do the right thing to comply. And so even as I went through my education degree and was a teacher, for me it was, I had to be seen to following the rules. The good girl knows what to say. You don't really stand up and, stir the pot. And it wasn't until I became a parent that I started to open my eyes, because it became relevant. So I think that for me, becoming a parent made me realize what children actually need, even though I'd been surrounded by all, education theory and I thought I knew what children needed. It wasn't until I actually had them myself that I really understood and really was interested in the brain science around it and all of the research that comes around, and it's not just the educational side, it's the psychological side of children as well that is so misunderstood. And so, no, I think that being a teacher myself, although I think I was proud of myself being quite that I connected well with my students and I tried to make their lessons really engaging. There were a few questions I'd, started to think about, like, because I'm a maths teacher, maths and science, and a common question, particularly around year 10, I'd get questions like, why do I need to learn this trig, miss? I don't understand why I need to learn geometry. I don't get it. I don't understand how I'd use this in everyday life. And for the most part, my answers would be things like, well, if you become a carpenter, you'll need trig. You might have to dig a pool in your backyard, and learning volume might be really, helpful. And I'd try and come up with real world examples. And then I'd end up like pivoting towards things like, well, it's just a way of activating your brain and thinking in different, it's not a normal way of thinking. So it's like activating parts of your brain that problem solving and things that don't feel logical and all that sort of stuff. And I'd come up with all these what I thought were brilliant answers. But the more that I've thought beyond that, the more I've realised that it is. A lot of the stuff that we teach children is completely irrelevant. And the only time that I have used that information was as a maths teacher. So, and a lot of the time as a maths teacher, I'd be reteaching myself the concepts every year because I'd forgotten how to use them, because I don't use them in real life. And they are abstract, and a lot of it you do have to go back and reteach yourself. So then the question became, why are we teaching children all of this content and putting so much pressure on them when in reality that isn't actually going to help them to become successful, happy, thriving people who can, overcome adversity and be resilient? Because all of those things I didn't learn at school. All of those things I learned like only 5 or 6 years ago was I able to actually unpack a lot of this stuff as an adult. I learned how to get good grades. I learned how to work the system. I knew how to follow the rules of an essay so I could write a good essay. I knew how to work that really well. But when it came to actually throwing me into a situation where I had to problem solve for myself or I had to stand up for myself, then that was really foreign to me. We don't get taught those specific skills, and they're the skills that you need as an adult. You don't need to know trigonometry, and even now you don't need to know trigonometry because we've got these devices that we carry with us at all times and we can get knowledge at the drop of a hat. So there's other things that we need to learn in order to help us to become the best versions of ourselves. So unpacking that has been little bit by little bit, particularly as I've become a mum and particularly as you go down rabbit holes. So, when you're starting to look up research where your children are going to go to school and what you want for them and who your child is as a person, and you start to match up their personality and whether they're actually going to be a good fit for school, which upon thinking about my oldest daughter just wouldn't fit that mold. And that was like one of the sparks for thinking about homeschooling, is that at the age of 5, I knew that if I sent her to school, one of two things were going to happen. She's a really feisty, strong-willed child, and not like me. I was super obedient, so she's been a real challenge for me to parent. But and that's taken me a long time to work out how to parent her so that I can honour who she is. Schools aren't made for that. They're not made. That teachers often, a lot of people, because even I still struggle with this, and I feel like I've done a lot of research on it, know how to handle strong personalities. So she would either become a compliant child who would then lose herself because that's not who she is, or she'd be the naughty kid. She'd be the one that was always getting in trouble. And I didn't want either of those for her, which is what really led me down the rabbit hole of looking into education. And there's a few things, once you read them, you can't unread those understandings. So there's a few books like John Holt's books, which was like How Children Fail, How Children Learn, Teach Your Own, and Peter Gray's book, which was Freedom to Learn. And those books were just phenomenal, helping me to understand how human beings actually learn and what we're capable of, and biologically what we have known for centuries, how we've all survived without having to know the information we think children need to learn now, and how we need to be connected with nature, and how when we're disconnected from nature, that's when we're starting to see so many problems, mental health problems, and in particular mental health problems.
Yeah, we're definitely going to get to that topic a little bit for sure, because it's one that I am feel very strongly about, and I've seen it become more and more spoken about lately, and I think that's really great. Before we do get to that, I just wanted to ask this question, because I have been having this kind of conversation with some of my friends lately, and we're of an age where a lot of people are having their first child, second child, and their child is getting to an age where they would, potentially look at introducing technology into their life. And I want to know, because you touched on it just briefly a little bit before, things like trigonometry and mathematics can be easily done now on a device that we have. And so to me, that says in some way we might not need to learn trigonometry in the school, but we may need to learn how to use that device that tells us how to use trigonometry, just as an example. So how do you strike that balance with your understanding of bringing children up and your emphasis on like the Wildlings School and bringing them into nature and that connection there with technology? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so technology is an interesting one. I think that we don't know enough about the outcomes of technology use on young kids. However, we have to be realistic in that we can't escape technology at all in terms of moving forward. So the question becomes, how do we teach children to balance technology, how to live with it in balance, and to use it as a tool and not as I'm bored and I need to be engaged in something, like the social media side to technology and the other sides of technology that help us in our everyday lives is something that we need to have an ongoing conversation with our children about. So it is definitely a really tricky part. I mean, we do use aspects of technology even at forest schools. So even for, say, identifying birds or snakes and things like that, we use the technology to make sure that we do our safety sweeps and recording of different, even our bookings and stuff like that. So there's definitely an important aspect of how technology helps us to get on with things and to find information easily, but we have to balance that with, and I think there's a difference between technology and social media as well. So that social side of technology is quite different to using your calculator, to using different apps to find information, because I think that there's a place for both of them. And what age that technology should be introduced to your children is still something that is debated, and there's lots of different conversations around. But I think that also we don't know the long-term outcomes of allowing our children to use technology. There's been a lot of research on how it highlights the same centers of the brain for, when we're using pokies and stuff like that, the reward system in the brain. So I think we do need to be careful with how we use technology, and I think as adults we need to be setting the example with that. For us, because we homeschool our children, they don't have the influence of other kids. So we have a lot more control over who our children are hanging around with. Not that that's what we're trying to do, but we tend to align with other families who have a similar idea on how we use technology. So we don't have other children, our children aren't spending loads of hours with other children and other families who have got, whose children have phones at a really young age, and then we don't have pressure from our kids sort of asking for the technology, because it's only within our own little families, and we all sort of talk about every family is different, and every family will allow their children to do different things for different reasons. So we're a little bit more sheltered in that way, so we don't have that problem ourselves in our families. But I do know that it's becoming a really big issue with the families around us, my neighbours and things like that, who find it really hard because it is social pressure from other families and what other families are going through in terms of using that technology. And I think also going back to the trigonometry idea is that I don't think that that information should disappear entirely. There's definitely people who are going to find that interesting and is going to find it important and need to know how that works at a fundamental idea. But I just don't think everyone needs to know that. I think that's where technology can help us to run shortcuts in areas where we might just need a simple calculation once. We don't need to spend 10 weeks learning how to do it when we're only going to use it once in our life or never. So there's so many now topics in the world that we don't learn about at school that might actually be more important to an individual in achieving their goals. Technology can help us with that, but I don't think we want to be reliant on that either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's a really good point. Hey, like understanding technology, because there's like you said, it's not just, you can't just lump it all into one category, and it's just like
no,
you're either for it or against it. It's like managing that.
Yeah. So
I mean, I'd love to just kind of find out a little bit more about the school itself and the programs that you run. So if I, say my brother came up to you and said, hey, like I'd like to enroll my child into the program that you offer, what would you be, how would that play in their life? Like, how would that play out? Would they not be taking their kid to school entirely and coming into your program, or how does it look?
So it's because we're not technically a school. We're running the Forest School philosophy. So what we run are nature play programs, and we run a variety of those. So during school term, we run what we call our Forest Kindy. It's like a community day. So essentially, parents come with their children to our program. We can have up to 25 families, sometimes 30 families in our Forest School space. And during that program, we will do things like, during winter, we did fire focus. So we'd go down every day, we'd be lighting, the children would help us light the fires. We'd learn them how to use a fire striker. We'd set challenges with learning to, having to master that, little hands, because the children that come to that program generally around the ages of 3 to 6, sometimes a bit older, because we do get homeschooling families coming into that one as well. So just mastering fire striking, cooking on the fire, doing artwork that involves fire use and stuff like that. They're playing in the creek. They're sliding down the mudslide. They might be creating a swing off a branch, creating their own games. A lot of it's imaginary, but it's unstructured free play. And we're there to help them if they need to use tools, or just supervising them if they're wanting to crawl along the creek bank or do something that's a little bit more risky. We also have homeschool programs that are specifically aimed for school-age children and older, because a lot of older children it's just a little bit of a different demographic. We have playgroups for people who have really young children, so that's more focused, again, on free play, but we don't do a lot of the tools or the firework, and it's more around songs and really simple crafts and storytelling. And then we also offer different programs on the school holidays. So those children that do go to school but still want to experience something that doesn't have a lot of structure but might have a theme to it. So they come and make a bow and arrow or some primitive weapons, or they'll come and do a raft building session or cubby building or something like that. So that's on the holidays as well. So that's the main combination of the programs that we run, but we also run programs for special needs children. So we'll have days where it's dedicated to children with autism. We've done a couple of disengaged youth programs. So we try and tailor the program around the types of children that are coming. But generally during the week, we have a couple of days where it's the community. So we're trying to rebuild that village so that people feel like they belong. So parents are there. They're still helping us to supervise. And because at that age as well, children do still love being around their parents. So, and a lot of parents are staying home with their kids as well. So they want to be able to do something with them and creating that community. So it's really important for us to have that village building built into our programs as well.
Wow, sounds awesome. I think,
yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, it's just it just sounds like such a pleasant environment to go and be a part of and contribute to as well. Not just arrive at and take from or drop your kids off at and walk away. I mean, I can't speak too much because I don't have children and I don't really know that that way of, why some parents do just want to drop and run sometimes with their kids. But I've definitely seen a little bit of that. So what are the things that have stood out to you, and what are the real kind of rich experiences that you've been able to see and enjoy whilst doing this work compared to, say, your experiences as a more traditional teacher?
Yeah. I think one of the main things that we really all just love witnessing is children who have the complete freedom to choose what they're doing in any moment, and that there's no end product, there's no underlying tick boxes. They just know that they're there for their own reasons. So we're not sitting there going, you have to finish your bow and arrow. If your bow and arrow doesn't work, then we're going to be angry, or the conversations that we have with them about that is that you might make a bow and arrow and it might snap, and that's okay. You might build a raft and it might sink to the bottom of the creek, and that's okay. You're here to have fun. You're here to get what you need to get out of this experience. So they are just so proud of what they create, or so proud of the mistakes that they make, because there is no agenda behind what we're doing. There's no reason. We're not there to, when it comes to education, there's always a reason. There's always a curriculum box that needs to be ticked. Even when you're in structured sports, there's always still a skill that needs to be mastered. Whereas with what we're doing, they will master skills, but there's no one there saying you have to do anything. It's all about what they want to create. So they just get so excited about having that freedom. Sometimes kids don't actually know what to do with themselves when they come to us because they've never experienced that freedom before. So when we get really large groups of, say, vacation care kids coming down, they literally don't know what to do because they're so used to being told what to do at every moment that they get very overwhelmed with the feeling of freedom. And that's devastating. Or watching children play in a creek like it's the biggest novelty in the world, and it's bittersweet because it's so heartwarming to know that what we can provide for kids is so amazing, but at the same time, children playing in a creek, that should be normal. It shouldn't be this amazing out of the blue experience for children. That should be something they experience all the time. and they just can't. And there's a lot of reasons why our society has evolved. Like, we've got a 24-hour news cycle. So parents are being fed every single fear that could possibly ever be out there in the world. They're hearing about it instantly, over and over again. So we can't sort of escape the fact that there is risk in the world. And so children are progressively getting more and more sheltered. And when, within 4 generations, children used to be able to roam 8 kilometres from their home, and then, 6 kilometres, and then 2 kilometres. And now children are barely allowed to play out in the front yard without adult supervision. So much of what's happened in society has changed the shape of parenting. And not only are we scared of our children getting harmed, we're also scared of being judged for letting our children do things that we might want them to do, but are not seen as socially acceptable. So you can't just let your 8-year-old go and walk down to the creek by themselves anymore, like we used to do when we were kids. That's not socially acceptable to do that, because person next door might say something, or if something were to happen, it's all of those things make it really difficult for modern day parents to, even if you want to let your children do these things, you sort of can't. So having those experiences and watching children to experience these things, there's nothing more special than seeing the looks on their faces and hearing the feedback. This is the best day we've ever had. This is the best excursion we've ever been on, and I can't wait to come back. And this is their favourite thing they did all holidays, like those sorts of experiences. Or in our weekly programs, just hearing parents say that they've been talking about us all week because they can't wait to come back. And it's not to do with us personally. I think it's the fact that we're just so on their side, and we, no matter what they do, no matter who they are, no matter if they've sat and had a meltdown for half an hour at our program, we're on their side and we are there with them unconditionally, and we know that they're human, and we are part of their village and we'll be there for them. And I think that's what's really special about the culture that we have within Wildlings as well.
There's so many huge underlying topics here that we could really go and touch upon. I think the whole social acceptance side of thing is massive, and it's very, very hard to escape that. I hear what you were saying before about the technology and how there's that social pressure to get involved in technology at schools and things like that, and that influence, and just makes me think, like, well, that translates directly to the culture that we have, say, like here in Australia, where if you want to do something different, like not drink alcohol, or if you want to, become a vegetarian, like this, the hardest things I've found about all of those, ways to trial living life is the social pressure to allow you to do it. And I feel like what you have created and this kind of path that you've choose to explore must have come with a lot of social pressure. And how have you managed this on a personal level?
You know what I did? I just surrounded myself by the people that were my champions. I think we must say it over and over again. We live in a bubble. So we are surrounded by the most amazing people. Our friendship group, which is, extended into our Wildlings group, they're all so like-minded that we haven't really come up against many people who think that what we're doing is wrong, or that they haven't challenged our views on it, which has been amazing. And I think probably too the way that we don't have anyone to answer to. So if people don't want to come to our programs, they don't. It's not like because we're in a school or something like that we have to answer to what the rest of everyone else is doing. We're like an addition to people's lives. We're not the rule. Everyone has to send their kids to school, has to educate them in some way. We've decided to opt out of that and do things our own way, and people have chosen to come with us. And we honestly haven't had that much negativity at all sprung on us, and which is good, because neither of us are very good with conflict or having to defend ourselves. But at the same time, we don't really care, because we know what we're doing is so important. We know it's so important, just even for our own children, and what we've created for our own children is something that has been the best thing to come out of our business. The village, the people that they've met, the role models that they've seen, the other beautiful families that they know, the friends that they've made. Like my children have like snake catchers. They know Jem the snake catcher, and they know, Rick, who does all the survival stuff, and they know all these amazing people that have taught them skills, not because they have to know it, but because they're there and they're willing to share their knowledge. And when people are passionate about sharing their knowledge, then children will listen, and it's all relevant and it's all in context, and it just makes sense to them to be part of that. So, yeah, in answer to that, we're just really lucky that we're surrounded by such amazing people.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's great that you've been able to facilitate and create that space for yourselves. And so, how do you have, what would be your wildest dream with what the programs and the work that you're doing? Do you see this going into, say, like, like a mainstream situation? Like, what do you think could be the biggest dream with this?
Yeah, well, starting small, we would just love to have our own land, our own space. So we use, at this point, we are very generous people that let us use land, and we work with the council, Brisbane Council and Sunshine Coast Council, to use their land, but to have our own space so that we could further explore where we could take this would be amazing. A lot of people talk to us about whether we would want to start our own school, but to be honest, at this point in time, we're so happy with the lifestyle we've created with the business and homeschooling our children that's not really particularly for me, a goal for me. I'd just love to see more schools understanding and taking on board outdoor learning and but just giving children more freedom. And so there's a whole, and it sort of scares me to even think about like my ideal, but allowing children, there's a whole models of education. There's schools out there that are doing such amazing work and allowing children, so Sudbury schools, democratic schools, where children are actually given so much freedom around their learning and their education. And there are schools in Australia that have done really well within the constraints of the Australian curriculum. So they're really bound by certain rules. But I would love to see, my ideal would be that I want to see children experiencing the freedom and respectful educational institutions, because I think that modelling what it is to be a good person and how to interact with people, and that is at the core of what we need for children. They need to be respected and in control, and autonomy is so important for children so that they don't end up with the negative mental health outcomes, so they don't have negative self-image, so they don't feel like they have to change who they are in order to fit in. And there's just so many flow-on effects from allowing children to feel a lot more individuality and autonomy, because they're all all children are in the same age. There's just so much, like you said, they have to conform in order to fit in. And that's where the danger lies for young children and teens and preteens, because then there's just so much pressure for them to feel like everyone else. They don't know who they are. You shouldn't be 20 or 30 or 40 years old finding out who you are. That's the age where you should be learning out who you are as a person, what you like, what you don't like, not what everyone else likes, and whether or not you can sort of twist yourself around to fit in with those people. So many years can be, like, I know that I feel that way myself. Like, I found myself in my 30s. I wish that I had the institution set up around me so that I learned that as a teenager, when you should be all through my life. Children, you should always be feeling like you're finding out who you are along the way, not feeling like you were suppressing who you were or who you wanted to be because it didn't really feel like you were going to keep the friends that you had. And even in this day and age of social media, I just think to myself, if I lived in the age of social media as a teenager, it would be mortifying. There is no way I'd be like dancing on TikTok and doing all these things, which I feel like a lot of kids feel like they need to do in order to have a social standing. Like, it terrifies me. So I'd like to see, my ultimate goal would be to see that children just feel like they could be themselves a lot more.
Yeah, I think we need to create a school like this for, like you said, people of all ages, because you touched on it then, you know, people only just figuring out who they are and finding themselves like later in life, 20s, 30s, 40s, you know. I have the opportunity to speak with some people, mainly men, that are, you know, in their 60s, and some of the work that they're doing is allowing them to uncover more about who they are, and they're in their 60s, you know. So the work that you do and how you allow kids and people essentially to kind of feel out their own way of learning. How does what's the importance of nature being the classroom, essentially the setting that you do your classes? We touched on it just before, and I just want to get your in-depth, as much as you can let out, about the importance of being in nature for growth and living.
So much to do, so much to say. Well, the first thing is that there is no walls, there's no boundary when it comes to nature. And because of that, there's so much in assessing your environment for yourself. So when you're out in nature, you have to be aware of your body. That's the first thing. You have to be aware of where your body is in nature. There's no smoothed out paths. Sometimes there isn't even a path. You need to be aware of where your feet are, where your hands are, what's above you, what's around you. So that's one of the really big benefits of children being out in nature, is that they are learning to risk assess for themselves. And it's something that we don't allow children to do very often, because we make all the decisions for them. And adults always have to come in and have the final word. When you're in nature, you have to be looking on the lookout for yourself. You have to be aware of the wildlife. You have to be aware of, you know, that's one of the things we talk about when we come down every session. We say, what's different about our space that is, well, what's different from last time we were here? And it might be that a tree's come down. It might be that we've had a lot of rain and the creek's full, which then leads us to all the seasonal changes that we're taking notice of. So when we are constantly inside, we miss opportunities to actually take notice of what's happening in our environment. So we can see the environmental changes. We can see what happens with different plants over time, especially when we're in the one space and we're visiting that over and over again. So we can really connect with what happens to an environment when we're there all the time. We can see the direct impact of our bodies in an environment when we go there. So we can show them, hey guys, remember last week when you were all along that bank there? I can actually see a little bit of erosion, and we can have conversations about our direct impact, our footfall, about how we can kill trees by climbing them over and over again, and how we have to think about our sustainability, how we use plants. So we use lots of plants in nature for crafting and for bush tucker and things like that, and having a very in-depth awareness of our environment is really, really important, which will then flow on to when they become decision makers as adults. They actually know what the impact is. Instead of being able to ignore it, it's an innate knowing now. If we decide to develop on this area, it is going to have an impact on our stream. So we're having constant conversations with children about what happens, where this water comes from, what could be in the water, what's happening further upstream, what happens when the farmer upstream dumps his waste into the water, or what happens when his pesticides are in the water, what happens when we've had a lot of rain and the runoff from the roads pollutes our water, things washing up in our river. Like you notice those things when you're there constantly. You get to actually see those details and understand them, which you won't get. You can't sit in a classroom and learn that stuff and truly know it. My children in particular have an intimate knowledge of the space that we use beyond what we do as adults, because they scale the trees. Like, they have relationships with the animals that live there. So there's a possum that lives in one of our fig trees. They will see that possible. I can't get up into the fig tree, so I have no idea. I can only get passing my phone up so she can take a photo of it. Like, that's about as connected as I can be, but she can be, because she's up in that tree, because she can get there. Her body is so strong. She can pull herself up like a master climber, because she spent her whole life not being told that she can't, or that she's going to hurt herself, because we taught them to trust the innate abilities of their bodies. Because they're out in nature, they have an opportunity to actually experience their body in uneven surfaces, in unpredictable environments. There's also the fact that the environment just is always a positive, like it always is a positive experience for our kids. Like, they always can take something positive away from being out in nature. It resets everyone. You can find quiet and solace even in a loud environment. There's always somewhere you can go to escape from other people. Even for parents, we say to them, like, if you come down and you just need some time to yourself, we'll often have parents who will just go and take some time for themselves, and they'll go sit in a quiet space and just know that they can take that time for themselves. Something about that you would never get from being inside. There's no way that you could go somewhere with children inside and feel like you could just escape and really feel like you've had a moment to yourself. And it's beautiful down there. Like, it's being in nature, there's just nothing like the feeling of being connected to the ground and actually feeling it, knowing what it feels like when it rains down there. We're down there when it rains. We're down there when it's in all sorts of different weather, as long as it's safe. And the children are not scared of being in the rain. Like, we often say, we look out the window and it's a bit cloudy and we'll go, we're not going to go. Whereas the kids are like, why not? We'll just take our raincoats. So building up this next generation of resilient children who will just take life and run with it, because they're not afraid of any barriers that come up in their way, because they've always had a way to problem solve it, and they've experienced adversity and difficulty, and they've still had an amazing time. So there's just so much about the outdoors and the space, and we get so many comments from people when they walk into our particular little piece of paradise. They're just like, I didn't even know this was here. It's in the middle of suburbia almost, and it's just magical. And there are so many amazing stories that will come from that. We've got some tree roots that look like fairy stairs. And the other day, one of our staff members saw these little insects that literally look like fairies. And so there was this whole story created around fairies living in the forest. And storytelling is such a huge part of that as well. And I've been in sessions where there's been a big hole that was dug by a child for a jump, but they've come up with this amazing story about a meteorite coming down and it's hit the ground. And they came up with this story all on their own and just sat there and listened to their creativity, and then this gameplay and imagination that evolved from a blank canvas that they've had. They're just an invitation from nature to play. So I think we undervalue how important nature is for children, but all people, and how much it can really help us to feel fulfilled and purposeful.
Yeah, I think I love that, and thanks so much for condensing it so nicely into
So much you could say.
Easily digestible amount of content. Like, that is brilliant. I think. Do you think it's possible? Is there an age cutoff where it's like, sorry, I'm 32 and I'm unable to tap back into that realm of experience and creativity from nature?
Look, I think there's always going to be some barriers that people put in their minds about nature. I think some people will really, there's a few big things that come up. So snakes and spiders are big barriers for people. So if you have really big fears surrounding those, and then it can be the end of even trying. But once you're out there, if you can get past those, really, if you're actually in nature, some of the activities we provide for children will be taken up by parents and grandparents. Oh, the grandparents, oh my gosh, it's like we get all sorts of family members coming down to our programs, but it's the grandparents who come down and go, I did this as a child. It's all the memories are flooding back, and it's being able to connect with their grandparent, with their grandchildren, doing some of these activities is so special. And honestly, if you were going to do this on your own, like if you're going to go grab a whole heap of materials and make a raft with your grandkids, like that's a lot of effort to go to. So what we provide also is that shortcut. We'll bring all the stuff. You just come and use it, and you don't even have to help you make us clean it up a little bit, but you don't have to then dispose of anything. Like we take care of all that. So we've got, particularly with our raft building and our fire sessions, grandparents will come down and they will work with children. We try and really emphasize the fact that we're not doing the activity for kids. The kids have to do it themselves. But if you're working together as a team and just being there and experiencing that with your children or with your grandchildren is something that we're so glad that we can provide that opportunity for people, because a lot of the time we're just not going to do that. I remember when before I became a parent, I was like, I'm going to take my kids down to the creek and we're going to make boats, and I'm going to be the most amazing mum. And whilst I do that, the only reason I do that is because I have to show up for other people, right? So because I run the programs, I'm running it, I have to organise it for other people. Otherwise, you probably, like a lot of people aren't going to go to that effort to go and do that with their kids. So when you actually go somewhere where there's already a village or where there's already programs running, it takes all that difficulty or that barrier of actually doing it out, and you can actually connect so strongly with your children and doing these really simple things that nature provides, like making a boat out of a seed pod, or making a necklace out of leaves, or whatever it is that we do. There's just so many special moments that you can create for families.
Yeah, I mean, it must be so nice to be able to share the knowledge that you have gathered and to see it get picked up. Do you feel that it's something that you're starting to see in other parts of the world as well, or other parts of Australia, or do you still feel like it's got a long way to go to really kind of get the attention out there of others?
Europe's doing it pretty well. Like the Scandinavian countries, they've been onto it for years, and bush kindies and outdoor education has been a staple part of their communities for a very long time. England and their bush nurseries and stuff like that are really big. But I think there is still a long way to go. And I think there's also sort of like, particularly with the kindergarten age, we'll do it at kindergarten, and then it really tapers out. And so the only then experience children have beyond that is the odd excursion or a little bit of outdoor recreation, or if they choose a subject in high school that's got to do with the outdoors. There's no thread woven through their whole entire education. It's not a mainstay. It's not a normal part of their daily life, which is where it needs to go. And I think that everywhere around the world really needs to embrace that a lot more. So there is a lot of work to be done. And in Australia, we're surprised at, we pride ourselves at being the outdoorsy nation that likes to do things. But realistically, when we see the number of children coming through our programs that have never felt mud before or climbed a tree, there's a lot of work to be done, a lot of work.
I often find that so incredible, hey, that in the eyes of a lot of people overseas, Australia gets seen as this real sporty and active country, but we've recently been the most obese country numerous times out of any country in the world, probably now currently sitting at third or fourth on that list. And that's just such a big slap in the face to a lot of people that don't even know this information. And it's just like, we've got a long way to go, but I think there's hope. Like there's definitely,
absolutely,
there's definitely hope. That's for sure.
Yeah. I'm always an optimist, glass half full. But there's definitely, I think sometimes we all like to just, ignorance is bliss maybe. We just like to think that it's all a certain way, even if it doesn't reflect our actual reality. If we feel like we're all active, we convince ourselves we're all active and that we don't need to do anything else, and we don't need to change anything, because as soon as we acknowledge that there's a problem, it means that we have to take action. And a lot of people are complacent and they don't want to actually change anything, because change can be hard. It means that we have to put in some effort. It means that we have to evaluate our culture and the way that we do things, and that's scary for people. But we don't need I love that Sea Shepherd, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but he always says you don't need everybody. You don't need everybody to be out there making change. You just need a few people who are dedicated to doing it and doing it well, and that's enough to create that change and that ripple effect. So that's what gives me hope as well.
I love that. I'm going to use that. Thank you for sharing. That's
Paul Watson. I got his name. Paul Watson. He was one that came. Yeah.
Well, I'm just going to continually refer back to Vicci being the one that came up with that. So
No.
take it and roll. So, and I think it needs to be said too that, you know, like we kind of get this being outdoors and exercise and movement quite often gets lumped into this single category. And a lot of people, you know, if they exercise throughout the day, it gets taken as, okay, well, that's great. Like you've ticked the box on that. That's healthy. And it very much is healthy, and it's better to exercise and do nothing at all. But I think there's also this, it kind of gets lumped into being outdoors and the connection that you have. If you go and exercise, you've been outdoors, so you've connected to the outdoors. But so often we actually just move through those spaces and we don't fully connect with it. You know, we we go from being inside to putting on our running shoes to going running or walking or cycling or whatever the activity may be, kicking the football, et cetera, or being inside, putting on our shoes, walking or driving to a yoga class, and then being inside doing the movement. And not once there has your skin really touched the ground. And I feel like that really does need to be honored as its own separate practice of connecting to earth and its own separate bucket of health, you know, an element that really needs to take precedence in every part of your day, or as much as you can.
And those people that do that, they see the health benefits, and they continue doing that because they know how important it is in order for them to live a full and happy and pleasurable existence, just for the joy of it too. You know, like I think we forget to prioritize joy, and being out in nature can bring us so much joy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd love to, you know, before we have to kind of finish up with, and I don't want to take too much more of your time, but we've gone into a space of time where more people are now living in urban environments than they live in rural environments, and that's quite a big thing. How, like, what are the things that you can provide in by way of advice to parents and, you know, people as a whole, you know, about how to make small changes, or what you can do to get a little bit more, or get rewired in daily life? Because I'd imagine it's probably something you get asked a lot. Like, what are the things that people can do?
Yeah. So the first one of the questions we get asked quite a lot is, where can I go? So where can I go that's a great place to take my children, or just to go myself, or what's an easy walk I can do with my children? So one of the things that me and my husband did was we wrote down every single place that we love to go within 40 minutes of our house. And so when we're looking for a bit of inspiration, we can just go straight to the list and go, we haven't been there in a while, we'll go there. So that's the first thing, is just knowing where you like to go, where's easy, where's convenient, where you haven't been in a while. Because sometimes I think there's two different types of people. Some people like going to the same place all the time, and then some people like different places. Like they need the next adventure, somewhere a bit different. So that's probably one of the first things. The second thing I think people need to evaluate is how busy, like look at your weekly schedule and decide whether you need to be doing all the things. So particularly parents with school-aged children, do you need to be doing all of the extracurricular activities? not that extracurricular activities are negative, it's just that they're still a adult structured activity. So even sports and things like that, they're still adult structured. Children can't go in and change the rules. They can't go in and do what they like in those sorts of environments. So you just need to sort of maybe peel that back a little bit so that you can create some space to go and spend some time of an afternoon. So instead of going to netball or rugby, maybe you spend that afternoon meeting with friends at the beach or at a local creek or at the lake or wherever it is that's close to your home, where you can just sit and relax and reconnect. And finding those moments as much as you can will help you with younger children. Children need to be outside. They need to move their bodies. If you're finding that their behaviours are starting to get really difficult, then it probably means that they need some time for some unstructured time in nature. And all of you can go and find, the great thing about that is that you don't all have to be doing the same thing. So your child can be off doing something and you can be enjoying the space in a different way. And if you go with more people, if you find people, this is probably the best thing you can do, find people to go with. Make yourself accountable. Accountability is the biggest thing about being in nature. If you finding that you can't do it on your own, if you find other people to do it with and you make plans, then you are more likely to go. Or even if you have to join a group, if you have to join a nature play group or somewhere else, or even a bushwalking group, and you have made a commitment, especially if you've made a paid commitment, then you will actually go and do that, because sometimes we need that to force ourselves out. This is so easy to say, I'm tired, the kids are tired, it's been a big week, I don't feel like it, it's raining, it's cloudy, it's windy, it's whatever it is. If you make a commitment, if you have someone to be accountable with, then you're more likely to go out and do it, and then you'll be able to form that habit, and then you'll realise why you want to keep doing it, and it won't be so hard anymore.
Brilliant. I love some takeaways like that. Again, I'm not going to apply them to my own child's life because I don't have any, but I'm hopeful.
No.
I'm hopeful that some people will.
Yeah, that's right.
Have you seen the movie 2040?
I haven't actually. It's one of those things we were going to do a screening up here, and I never actually got around. I've listened to lots of people tell me about it, but I haven't watched it myself.
What does the world look like in 2040 for you? Do you think we're going to be able to move into a healthier space? And what do you think are the biggest barriers that are stopping society moving that way right now?
I think the biggest barriers at the moment, probably complacency would be my biggest one. Everyone thinking that, and I'm probably guilty of this, but I am an optimist, so I always think that there's hope, and I think that there will come a turning point where we will have to change things, and I think we're capable of changing them. I think that I have to feel this way. That humans are capable of making changes and knowing that they're the right changes for the right reasons. So I like to think that 2040 is actually going to be a better version of where we are now. I have to believe that. And, yeah, I think that there are lots of small changes that can be made. I think a lot of people are making those small changes. I think that if we can spread our messages of positivity and without making people feel, I think there's a fine line between making people feel obligated or judged, being able to help people make changes in a way that feels natural and authentic to them without making them feel bad about their current way of being, because we're all on our own journey of whatever it is. And sometimes we just, particularly mental health wise, sometimes we just can't allow ourselves to think about sustainability or recycling because there's so much else going on. There's a lot of healing we need to do within ourselves first. So I think that message is getting stronger. I feel like all of the messages of equality and equity around the world and all of the different areas that this moves into, those messages are getting louder and more people are starting to understand how we can make the world a better place for people. That's a ripple effect. So I like to think that, 2040 will be a better point in time, because I can't move forward with my children any other way and thinking that it's going to be worse. So all I can do is know that I know so many amazing people who are doing amazing things, and that can only get better rather than worse.
Oh, I'm so glad that that you're in this world and you're taking this journey, because it's that brings me a lot of hope too.
Thank you.
You know, on a final note, and I promise I won't ask any more questions, even though I really do want to. What do you think Indigenous knowledge and the lessons that the First Nations people can bring to this schooling system, this society that we just haven't embraced and accepted into living, really?
Yeah, I think Indigenous knowledge is the most amazing, incredible system of knowledge. The more that I find out about it, the more I'm just blown away, and also heartbroken that the knowledge is, some of it's lost, a lot of it's lost. There is so much opportunity for Indigenous knowledge to be incorporated into the way that we move forward with the management of our land, and so many other knowledge systems that we have, understanding and acceptance. And I recently read Fire Country by Victor Stephenson, and he talks a lot about fire management on land. And although I innately already knew that their wisdom was beyond anything that Western world has ever come up with, when you read it and it's incorporated into story and language and culture and connection, I just don't understand how we haven't valued this more. And even up to this point, it's still not valued. Like, I can see it starting to creep in, and a lot of it's that knowledge and those systems are starting to become highlighted a lot more. I know that, it's absolutely mind-blowing how intricate their knowledge of our environment and our place in it is. And I'm so excited to learn more myself. We have lots of opportunities. We're looking forward to working with a lot more of our local Gubbi people, who I'd like to acknowledge also while we're here. It's really exciting to see that knowledge being respected and known, and watching our children learn that information and to be able to pass that on is really special as well. And beyond that as well is also recognising the white privilege and understanding Indigenous cultural issues and the racism that's embedded in our country. I like to think that conversation is really starting to amp up now, and I'd really like to see all of us working towards helping the Indigenous people in Australia, First Nations people, to really take that voice that they've had, that they've been crying out and screaming at us for years since the invasion. I'd really love to be able to see them more empowered, and for white people to listen.
Yeah, I 100% feel the same. Feel how heartbreaking it is when you start to understand what has happened on a scale that's been hidden from us in many ways.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think you've nailed it on the head, and all we need to do is sit, shut up and listen sometimes.
Shut up. Absolutely. Shut up.
we ain't got solutions to so many issues that I feel like the First Nation people definitely do. So, yes.
They do. Yep.
I support that. And I really hope you can include it, that into the work that you do, because it's like no knowledge we've ever come across before, and it's completely undervalued. And I think it could drastically change the health of the people, the land, our just overall joy as we exist in this life, for sure. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, I'm I'm so great we just finished on that topic, because like I can feel it in the way that you speak about it, that it's so important. And I think that it's just a great thing to leave people thinking about. Vicci, thanks so much. I'm just like full of questions, but I'm going to if I need to pester you some more, I'll definitely do that via email. And
for sure.
I look forward to seeing the work that you are doing, spreading further, and hopefully being adopted and embraced by a lot more people.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Well, there you have it, everyone. Thanks a lot for joining us on the podcast today. I really hope it sparks a conversation in your life. Wildlingsforestschool.com is where you can head to find out some more information about the work that Vicci and Nicki do in their communities. I really hope this does engage a different thought process behind the way we can educate children in our society. And I'm not speaking for a place of expertise, because I don't have children myself, but I found it really interesting, and I know a lot of friends that have children, and I only want the best for them. And I think that this definitely resonates with some people. So thanks a lot for joining us, and reach out to us if you have any questions or you just want to share what you learnt from the podcast today. We really appreciate your time, and we really appreciate the effort it does take to download a podcast and listen all the way through till this point in time right now. So until next time, please take care of yourselves. Thanks a lot for joining us, and we will see you next time.